Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, at Jamaica Hospital in the borough of Queens in New York City. His parents were Frederick Christ Trump, a Bronx-born real estate developer whose parents were German immigrants from Karlstad, and Mary Ann MacLeod Trump, a Scottish housewife from Tong. He grew up in the Jamaica Estates neighborhood of Queens and attended the Kew Forest School from kindergarten through 7th grade. At age 13, he was enrolled in the New York Military Academy, a private boarding school, and in 1964, he enrolled at Fordham University. 2 years later he transferred to the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, graduating in May 1968 with a B.S. in economics. The New York Times reported in 1973 and 1976 that he had graduated first in his class at Wharton, but he had never made the school's honor roll. In 2015, Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen threatened Fordham University and the New York Military Academy with legal action if they released Trump's academic records. While in college, Trump obtained 4 student draft deferments. In 1966, he was deemed fit for military service based upon a medical examination, and in July 1968 a local draft board classified him as eligible to serve. In October 1968, he was classified 1Y, a conditional medical deferment, and in 1972, he was reclassified 4F due to bone spurs, permanently disqualifying him from service. In 1977, Trump married Czech model Ivana Zelníková. They have 3 children, Donald Jr., born 1977, Ivanka, born 1981, and Eric, born 1984. Ivana became a naturalized United States citizen in 1988. The couple divorced in 1992, following Trump's affair with actress Marla Maples. Maples and Trump married in 1993 and had 1 daughter, Tiffany, born 1993. They were divorced in 1999, and Tiffany was raised by Marla in California. In 2005, Trump married Slovenian model Melania Knaus. They have 1 son, Baron, born 2006. Melania gained U.S. citizenship in 2006. Trump went to Sunday school and was confirmed in 1959 at the First Presbyterian Church in Jamaica, Queens. In the 1970s, his parents joined the Marble Collegiate Church in Manhattan, which belongs to the Reformed Church. The pastor at Marble, Norman Vincent Peale, ministered to Trump's family until Peale's death in 1993. Trump has described Peale as a mentor. In 2015, after Trump said he attends Marble, the church stated he is not an active member of the church. In November 2019, Trump appointed his personal pastor, televangelist Paula White, to the White House Office of Public Liaison. In October 2020, Trump said that he identified as a non-denominational Christian. In 1982, Trump was listed on the initial Forbes list of wealthy individuals as having a share of his family's estimated $200 million net worth. His financial losses in the 1980s caused him to be dropped from the list between 1990 and 1995. In its 2020 billionaires ranking, Forbes estimated Trump's net worth at $2.1 billion, 1,001st in the world, 275th in the U.S., making him one of the richest politicians in American history and the first billionaire American president. Forbes estimated that his net worth declined 31% and his ranking fell 138 spots between 2015 and 2018. When he filed mandatory financial disclosure forms with the Federal Election Commission (FEC) in July 2015, Trump claimed a net worth of about $10 billion. However, FEC figures cannot corroborate this estimate because they only show each of his largest buildings as being worth over $50 million, yielding total assets worth more than $1.4 billion and debt of more than $265 million. While a student at Wharton and after graduating in 1968, Trump worked at his father Fred's real estate company, Trump Management, which owned middle-class rental housing in New York City's outer boroughs. In 1971, he became president of the company and began using the Trump Organization as an umbrella brand. It was registered as a corporation in 1981. Trump attracted public attention in 1978 with the launch of his family's first Manhattan venture, the renovation of the derelict Commodore Hotel, adjacent to Grand Central Terminal. The financing was facilitated by a $400 million city property tax abatement arranged by Fred Trump, who also joined Hyatt in guaranteeing $70 million in bank construction financing. The hotel reopened in 1980 as the Grand Hyatt Hotel, and that same year, Trump obtained rights to develop Trump Tower, a mixed-use skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The building houses the headquarters of the Trump Organization and was Trump's primary residence until 2019. In 1988, Trump acquired the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan with a loan of $425 million from a consortium of banks. 2 years later, the hotel filed for bankruptcy protection, and a reorganization plan was approved in 1992. In 1995, Trump lost the hotel to Citibank and investors from Singapore and Saudi Arabia, who assumed $300 million of the debt. In 1996, Trump acquired the vacant 71-story skyscraper at 40 Wall Street. After an extensive renovation, the high-rise was renamed the Trump Building. In the early 1990s, Trump won the right to develop a 70-acre, 28 hectares tract in the Lincoln Square neighborhood near the Hudson River. Struggling with debt from other ventures in 1994, Trump sold most of his interest in the project to Asian investors, who were able to finance completion of the project, Riverside South. In 1985, Trump acquired the Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida. Trump converted the estate into a private club with an initiation fee and annual dues and used a wing of the house as a private residence. In 2019, Trump declared Mar-a-Lago his primary residence, although under a 1993 agreement with the town of Palm Beach, Trump may spend no more than 3 weeks per year there. In 1984, Trump opened Harrah's at Trump Plaza, a hotel and casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. The project received financing from the Holiday Corporation, which also managed the operation. Gambling had been legalized there in 1977 to revitalize the once popular seaside destination. The property's poor financial results worsened tensions between Holiday and Trump, who paid Holiday $70 million in May 1986 to take sole control of the property. Earlier, Trump had also acquired a partially completed building in Atlantic City from the Hilton Corporation for $320 million. Upon its completion in 1985, that hotel and casino were called Trump Castle. Trump's then-wife Ivana managed it until 1988. Trump acquired a third casino in Atlantic City, the Trump Taj Mahal, in 1988 in a highly leveraged transaction. It was financed with $675 million in junk bonds and completed at a cost of $1.1 billion, opening in April 1990. The project went bankrupt the following year, and the reorganization left Trump with only half his initial ownership stake and required him to pledge personal guarantees of future performance. Facing enormous debt, he gave up control of his money-losing airline, Trump Shuttle, and sold his megayacht, the Trump Princess, which had been indefinitely docked in Atlantic City while leased to his casinos for use by wealthy gamblers. In 1995, Trump founded Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts, which assumed ownership of Trump Plaza, Trump Castle, and the Trump Casino in Gary, Indiana. THCR purchased the Taj Mahal in 1996 and underwent successive bankruptcies in 2004, 2009, and 2014, leaving Trump with only 10% ownership. He remained chairman of Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts until 2009. The Trump Organization began acquiring and constructing golf courses in 1999. It owned 16 golf courses and resorts worldwide and operated another 2 as of December 2016. From his inauguration until the end of 2019, Trump spent around 1 of every 5 days at one of his golf clubs. The Trump name has been licensed for various consumer products and services, including foodstuffs, apparel, adult learning courses, and home furnishings. According to an analysis by The Washington Post, there are more than 50 licensing or management deals involving Trump's name, which have generated at least $59 million in yearly revenue for his companies. By 2018, only 2 consumer goods companies continued to license his name. In September 1983, Trump purchased the New Jersey Generals, a team in the United States Football League. After the 1985 season, the league folded, largely due to Trump's strategy of moving games to a fall schedule where they competed with the NFL for audience, and trying to force a merger with the NFL by bringing an antitrust suit against the organization. Trump's businesses have hosted several boxing matches at the Atlantic City Convention Hall adjacent to and promoted as taking place at the Trump Plaza in Atlantic City. In 1989 and 1990, Trump lent his name to the Tour de Trump cycling stage race, which was an attempt to create an American equivalent of European races such as the Tour de France or the Giro d'Italia. In the late 1980s, Trump mimicked the actions of Wall Street's so-called corporate raiders. Trump began to purchase significant blocks of shares in various public companies, leading some observers to think he was engaged in the practice called greenmail, or feigning the intent to acquire the companies and then pressuring management to repurchase the buyer's stake at a premium. In 1988, Trump purchased the defunct Eastern Airlines shuttle, with 21 planes and landing rights in New York City, Boston, and Washington, D.C. He financed the purchase with $380 million from 22 banks, rebranded the operation the Trump Shuttle, and operated it until 1992. Trump failed to earn a profit with the airline and sold it to U.S. Air. In 1992, Trump, his siblings Marianne, Elizabeth, and Robert, and his cousin John W. Walter, each with a 20% share, formed All County Building Supply and Maintenance Corp. The company had no offices and is alleged to have been a shell company for paying the vendors providing services and supplies for Trump's rental units and then billing those services and supplies to Trump management with markups of 20 to 50% and more. The proceeds generated by the markups were shared by the owners. The increased costs were used as justification to get state approval for increasing the rents of Trump's rent-stabilized units. From 1996 to 2015, Trump owned all or part of the Miss Universe pageants, including Miss USA and Miss Teen USA. Due to disagreements with CBS about scheduling, he took both pageants to NBC in 2002. In 2007, Trump received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for his work as producer of Miss Universe. After NBC and Univision dropped the pageants from their broadcasting lineups in June 2015, Trump bought NBC's share of the Miss Universe organization and sold the entire company to the William Morris Talent Agency. In 2004, Trump co-founded Trump University, a company that sold real estate training courses priced from $1,500 to $35,000. After New York state authorities notified the company that its use of the word university violated state law, its name was changed to Trump Entrepreneur Initiative in 2010. In 2013, the state of New York filed a $40 million civil suit against Trump University, alleging that the company made false statements and defrauded consumers. In addition, 2 class actions were filed in federal court against Trump and his companies. Internal documents revealed that employees were instructed to use a hard sell approach, and former employees testified that Trump University had defrauded or lied to its students. Shortly after he won the presidency, Trump agreed to pay a total of $25 million to settle the 3 cases. Trump has written up to 19 books on business, financial, or political topics, though he has used ghostwriters to do this. Trump's first book, The Art of the Deal, was a New York Times bestseller. While Trump was credited as co-author, the entire book was ghostwritten by Tony Schwartz. According to The New Yorker, the book expanded Trump's renown far beyond New York City, making him an emblem of the successful tycoon. Trump has called the book his second favorite, after the Bible. Trump made cameo appearances in 8 films and television shows from 1985 to 2001. Donald has had a sporadic relationship with the professional wrestling promotion WWE since the late 1980s, appearing at WrestleMania 23 in 2007 and inducted into the celebrity wing of the WWE Hall of Fame in 2013. Starting in the 1990s, Trump was a guest about 24 times on the nationally syndicated Howard Stern Show. He also had his own short-form talk radio program called Trumped, 1 to 2 minutes on weekdays, from 2004 to 2008. From 2011 until 2015, he was a weekly unpaid guest commentator on Fox and Friends. Trump's political party affiliation changed numerous times. He registered as a Republican in 1987, a member of the Independence Party, the New York State affiliate of the Reform Party, in 1999, a Democrat in 2001, a Republican in 2009, unaffiliated in 2011, and a Republican in 2012. In 1987, Trump placed full-page advertisements in 3 major newspapers, advocating peace in Central America, accelerated nuclear disarmament talks with the Soviet Union, and reduction of the federal budget deficit by making American allies pay their fair share for military defense. He ruled out running for local office but not for the presidency. Trump ran in the California and Michigan primaries for nomination as the Reform Party candidate for the 2000 presidential election but withdrew from the race in February 2000. A July 1999 poll matching him against likely Republican nominee George W. Bush and likely Democratic nominee Al Gore showed Trump with 7% support. Donald Trump speculated about running against President Barack Obama in the 2012 election, making his first speaking appearance at the Conservative Political Action Conference (CPAC) in February 2011 and giving speeches in early primary states. In May 2011 he announced he would not run, and he endorsed Mitt Romney in February 2012. Trump's presidential ambitions were generally not taken seriously at the time. On June 16, 2015, Trump announced his candidacy for President of the United States. His campaign was initially not taken seriously by political analysts, but he quickly rose to the top of opinion polls. On Super Tuesday, Trump received the most votes, and he remained the front-runner throughout the primaries. After a landslide win in Indiana on May 3, 2016, which prompted the remaining candidates Cruz and John Kasich to suspend their presidential campaigns, RNC Chairman Reince Priebus declared Trump the presumptive Republican nominee. Hillary Clinton had a significant lead over Trump in national polls throughout most of 2016. In early July, her lead narrowed in national polling averages. Donald Trump and his running mate for vice president, Mike Pence. They appear to be standing in front of a huge screen with the colors of the American flag displayed on it. Trump is at the left, facing toward the viewer and making thumbs-up gestures. Pence is at right, facing Trump and clapping. On July 15, 2016, Trump announced his selection of Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his vice presidential running mate. 4 days later, the two were officially nominated by the Republican Party at the Republican National Convention. Trump and Clinton faced off in 3 presidential debates in September and October 2016. Trump's refusal to say whether he would accept the result of the election drew attention, with some saying it undermined democracy. Trump's campaign platform emphasized renegotiating U.S.-China relations and free trade agreements such as NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, strongly enforcing immigration laws, and building a new wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. His other campaign positions included pursuing energy independence while opposing climate change regulations such as the Clean Power Plan and the Paris Agreement, modernizing and expediting services for veterans, repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, abolishing Common Core education standards, investing in infrastructure, simplifying the tax code while reducing taxes for all economic classes, and imposing tariffs on imports by companies that offshore jobs. During the campaign, he advocated a largely non-interventionist approach to foreign policy while increasing military spending, extreme vetting or banning immigrants from Muslim-majority countries to preempt domestic Islamic terrorism, and aggressive military action against the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. He described NATO as obsolete. On November 8, 2016, Trump received 306 pledged electoral votes versus 232 for Clinton. The official counts were 304 and 227 respectively, after defections on both sides. Trump received nearly 2.9 million fewer popular votes than Clinton, which made him the 5th person to be elected president while losing the popular vote. Trump's victory was a political upset. Polls had consistently shown Clinton with a nationwide, though diminishing, lead, as well as an advantage in most of the competitive states. Trump's support had been modestly underestimated, while Clinton's had been overestimated. Trump was inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States on January 20, 2017. During his first week in office, he signed 6 executive orders, interim procedures in anticipation of repealing the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, reinstatement of the Mexico City policy, authorizing the Keystone XL and Dakota Access Pipeline construction projects, reinforcing border security, and beginning the planning and design process to construct a wall along the U.S. border with Mexico. Upon inauguration, Trump said that he delegated the management of his real estate business to his sons Eric and Donald Jr., with no resolution of questions about potential conflicts of interest. His daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner became assistant to the president and senior advisor to the president, respectively. Before being inaugurated, Trump moved his businesses into a revocable trust run by his eldest sons and a business associate. According to ethics experts, this measure did not help avoid conflicts of interest, because Trump continued to profit from his businesses. Because Trump continued to have knowledge of how his administration's policies affected his businesses, ethics experts recommended selling the businesses. Though Trump said he would eschew new foreign deals, the Trump Organization pursued expansions of its operations in Dubai, Scotland, and the Dominican Republic. Lawsuits alleged that Trump violated the domestic and foreign emoluments clauses of the U.S. Constitution. The plaintiffs said that Trump's business interests could allow foreign governments to influence him. NBC News reported in 2019 that representatives of at least 22 foreign governments, including some facing charges of corruption or human rights abuses, appeared to have spent money at Trump Organization businesses during his presidency. The litigation marks the first time that the emoluments clauses have been substantively litigated in court. As president, Trump mocked the emoluments clause as phony. In January 2021, the U.S. Supreme Court dismissed the lawsuits as Trump was no longer president. Trump took office at height of the longest economic expansion in American history, which began in June 2009 and continued until February 2020, when the COVID-19 recession began. Throughout his presidency, Trump mischaracterized the economy as the best in American history. Trump rejects the scientific consensus on climate change. He slashed the budget for renewable energy research and reversed Obama-era policies directed at curbing climate change. In June 2017, Trump announced the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Agreement, making the U.S. the only nation in the world to not ratify the agreement. Trump rolled back more 100 federal environmental regulations, including those that curbed greenhouse gas emissions, air and water pollution, and the use of toxic substances. He weakened protections for animals and environmental standards for federal infrastructure projects, and expanded permitted areas for drilling and resource extraction, such as allowing drilling in the Arctic Refuge. Trump aimed to boost the production and exports of fossil fuels. Under Trump, natural gas expanded, but coal continued to decline. Through September 2020, the Trump administration won less than 16% of its deregulation efforts challenged in courts, compared to an average of about 70% during the two preceding administrations. Trump's proposed immigration policies were a topic of bitter and contentious debate during the campaign. He promised to build a wall on the Mexico-United States border to restrict illegal movement and vowed Mexico would pay for it. He pledged to deport millions of illegal immigrants residing in the United States, and criticized birthright citizenship for incentivizing anchor babies. As president, he frequently described illegal immigration as an invasion, and conflated immigrants with the criminal gang MS-13, though research shows undocumented immigrants have a lower crime rate than native-born Americans. On October 2, 2020, Trump announced that he had tested positive for COVID-19. He was admitted to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center that day and treated with the antiviral drug remdesivir, the steroid dexamethasone, and the unapproved experimental antibody REN-CoV-2. He was discharged 3 days later and by October 12 had tested negative for COVID-19 on consecutive days. By July 2020, Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic became a major issue for the 2020 presidential election. Democratic challenger Joe Biden sought to make the election a referendum on Trump's performance on the COVID-19 pandemic and the economy. Polls indicated voters blamed Trump for his pandemic response and disbelieved his rhetoric concerning the virus, with an Ipsos, ABC News poll indicating 65% of Americans disapproving of his pandemic response. In the final months of the campaign, Trump repeatedly claimed that the U.S. was rounding the turn in managing the pandemic, despite increasing numbers of reported cases and deaths. A few days before the November 3 election, the United States reported more than 100,000 cases in a single day for the first time. In January 2017, American intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA, represented by the Director of National Intelligence, jointly stated with high confidence that the Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election to favor the election of Trump. In March 2017, FBI Director James Comey told Congress, "The FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. That includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts." The connections between Trump associates and Russia were widely reported by the press. One of Trump's campaign managers, Paul Manafort, worked from December 2004 to February 2010 to help pro-Russian politician Viktor Yanukovych win the Ukrainian presidency. Other Trump associates, including former National Security Advisor Michael T. Flynn and political consultant Roger Stone, were connected to Russian officials. Russian agents were overheard during the campaign saying they could use Manafort and Flynn to influence Trump. Members of Trump's campaign and later his White House staff, particularly Flynn, were in contact with Russian officials both before and after the November election. On December 29, 2016, Flynn talked with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak about sanctions that were imposed that same day. Flynn later resigned in the midst of controversy over whether he misled Pence. Trump told Kislyak and Sergei Lavrov in May 2017 he was unconcerned about Russian interference in U.S. elections. Trump and his allies promoted a conspiracy theory that Ukraine, rather than Russia, interfered in the 2016 election, which was also promoted by Russia to frame Ukraine. After the Democratic National Committee was hacked, Trump first claimed it withheld its server from the FBI and third that the server was hidden in Ukraine. Members of the Trump administration spoke out against the conspiracy theories. On November 2, 2020, newly released passages from the Mueller report regarding Russian interference in the 2016 elections indicated that federal prosecutors could not establish that the hacked emails amounted to campaign contributions benefiting Trump's election chances, and that publication of those emails are likely protected by the First Amendment. In August 2019, a whistleblower filed a complaint with the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community about a July 25 phone call between Trump and President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky, during which Trump had pressured Zelensky to investigate CrowdStrike and Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden and his son Hunter, adding that the White House had attempted to cover up the incident. The whistleblower stated that the call was part of a wider campaign by the Trump administration and Trump's personal attorney Rudy Giuliani, which may have included withholding financial aid from Ukraine in July 2019 and canceling Vice President Pence's May 2019 Ukraine trip. Trump later confirmed that he withheld military aid from Ukraine, offering contradictory reasons for the decision. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi initiated a formal impeachment inquiry on September 24, 2019. The Trump administration subsequently released a memorandum of the July 25 phone call, confirming that after Zelensky mentioned purchasing American anti-tank missiles, Trump asked Zelensky to investigate and to discuss these matters with Giuliani and Attorney General William Barr. The testimony of multiple administration officials and former officials confirmed that this was part of a broader effort to further Trump's personal interests by giving him an advantage in the upcoming presidential election. In October 2019, William B. Taylor, Jr., the chargé d'affaires for Ukraine, testified before congressional committees that soon after arriving in Ukraine in June 2019, he found that Zelensky was being subjected to pressure directed by Trump and led by Giuliani. According to Taylor and others, the goal was to coerce Zelensky into making a public commitment to investigate the company that employed Hunter Biden, as well as rumors about Ukrainian involvement in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. He said it was made clear that until Zelensky made such an announcement, the administration would not release scheduled military aid for Ukraine and not invite Zelensky to the White House. On December 13, 2019, the House Judiciary Committee voted along party lines to pass 2 articles of impeachment, one for abuse of power and one for obstruction of Congress. After debate, the House of Representatives impeached Trump on both articles on December 18. The Senate impeachment trial began on January 16, 2020. On January 22, the Republican Senate majority rejected amendments proposed by the Democratic minority to call witnesses and subpoena documents. Evidence collected during the House impeachment proceedings was entered into the Senate record. For 3 days, January 22 to 24, the House impeachment managers presented their case to the Senate. They cited evidence to support charges of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, and asserted that Trump's actions were exactly what the Founding Fathers had in mind when they created the Constitution's impeachment process. Trump was acquitted of both charges by the Republican Senate majority, 52-48 on abuse of power and 53-47 on obstruction of Congress. Senator Mitt Romney was the only Republican who voted to convict Trump on one of the charges, the abuse of power. Following his acquittal, Trump fired impeachment witnesses and other political appointees and career officials he deemed insufficiently loyal. Breaking with precedent, Trump filed to run for a second term with the FEC within a few hours of assuming the presidency. Trump held his first re-election rally less than a month after taking office. In his first 2 years in office, Trump's re-election committee reported raising $67.5 million, allowing him to begin 2019 with $19.3 million cash on hand. From the beginning of 2019 through July 2020, the Trump campaign and Republican Party raised $1.1 billion but spent $800 million of that amount, losing their cash advantage over the Democratic nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden. The cash shortage forced the campaign to scale back advertising spending. Starting in spring 2020, Trump began to sow doubts about the election, repeatedly claiming without evidence that the election would be rigged, and that the expected widespread use of mail balloting would produce massive election fraud. On July 30, Trump raised the idea of delaying the election. When in August the House of Representatives voted for a $25 billion grant to the U.S. Postal Service for the expected surge in mail voting, Trump blocked funding, saying he wanted to prevent any increase in voting by mail. Trump became the Republican nominee on August 24, 2020. He repeatedly refused to say whether he would accept the results of the election and commit to a peaceful transition of power if he lost. Trump campaign advertisements focused on crime, claiming that cities would descend into lawlessness if his opponent, Biden, won the presidency. Trump repeatedly misrepresented Biden's positions during the campaign. Trump's campaign message shifted to racist rhetoric in an attempt to reclaim voters lost from his base. Biden won the election on November 3, receiving 81.3 million votes, 51.3%, to Trump's 74.2 million, 46.8%, and winning the Electoral College by 306 to 232. At 2 a.m. the morning after the election, with the results still unclear, Trump declared victory. After Biden was projected the winner days later, Trump said, "This election is far from over," and baselessly alleged election fraud. Trump and his allies filed many legal challenges to the results, which were rejected by at least 86 judges in both the state and federal courts, including by federal judges appointed by Trump himself, finding no factual or legal basis. Trump's unsubstantiated allegations of widespread voting fraud were also refuted by state election officials. After Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency (CISA) Director Chris Krebs contradicted Trump's fraud allegations, Trump dismissed him on November 17. On December 11, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear a case from the Texas Attorney General which asked the court to overturn the election results in 4 states won by Biden. Trump withdrew from public activities in the weeks following the election. He initially blocked government officials from cooperating in the presidential transition of Joe Biden. After 3 weeks, the administrator of the General Services Administration ascertained Biden the apparent winner of the election, allowing the disbursement of transition resources to his team. Trump still did not formally concede while claiming he recommended the GSA begin transition protocols. The Electoral College formalized Biden's victory on December 14. Trump continued attempting to overturn the results of the election, personally communicating with and threatening various Republican local, state, and federal officials, legislators, attorneys general, governors, and Vice President Pence for their help in overturning the election results. On February 10, 2021, Georgia prosecutors opened a criminal investigation into Trump's efforts to subvert the election in Georgia. Trump did not attend Biden's inauguration, leaving Washington for Florida hours before. On January 6, 2021, while congressional certification of the presidential election results was occurring in the Capitol, Trump held a rally nearby, where he called for the election result to be overturned and urged his supporters to take back our country by marching to the Capitol to show strength and fight like hell. Thousands of those supporters then stormed the Capitol around 1 p.m., disrupting certification and causing the evacuation of Congress. During the violence, Trump posted mixed messages on Twitter and Facebook, eventually tweeting to the rioters at 6 p.m., "Go home with love and in peace," but describing them as great patriots and very special, while still complaining that the election was stolen. After the mob was removed from the Capitol, Congress reconvened and confirmed the Biden election win in the early hours of the following morning. 5 people died due to the riot, including a Capitol policeman beaten by Trump supporters. The attack received national and international condemnation and led to calls for Trump to be impeached or declared unfit as president and for his immediate removal. On January 11, 2021, an article of impeachment charging Trump with incitement of insurrection against the U.S. government was introduced to the House. The House voted to impeach Trump on January 13 with a majority of 232 to 197, making him the first U.S. officeholder to be impeached twice. 10 Republicans voted for impeachment, the most members of a party ever to vote to impeach a president of their own party. On January 25, 2021, the article of impeachment was formally sent to the Senate for trial. The trial began on February 9. On February 13, Trump was acquitted when the Senate voted 57 to 43 for conviction, falling 10 votes short of the two-thirds majority required to convict. After his term ended, Trump went to live at his Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida. As provided for by the former President's Act, he established an office at Mar-a-Lago to handle his post-presidential activities.